The mystery of the Mispa.
The mystery of the Mispa sacred stones. In the Old Testament, book of Genesis, chapter 28, we find that when prophet Jacob was on his way to Padan Aram and saw the vision of that wonderful ladder, he erected a stone there upon which he poured oil and called it Bethel, that is, the house of God. Such blessed stones were erected at Mecca by prophets Abraham and his son Ishmael, in the land of Canaan by prophets Isaac and Jacob, and in Moab and elsewhere by the other descendants of Abraham. In those days, when the chosen family were leading a nomadic and pastoral life, it had no settled habitation where to build a house, especially dedicated to the worship of God. They used to erect a particular stone around which they used to make a hajj. That is to say, to turn round 7 times in the form of a dancing ring. The word hajj might frighten the Christian readers, and they might shrink at its sight because of its Arabic form and because of its being at present a Muslim religious performance. The word hajj is exactly identical in meaning and etymology with the same in the Hebrew and other Semitic languages. The Hebrew verb hagag is the same as the Arabic hajjaj, the difference being only in the pronunciation of the 3rd letter of the Semitic alphabet Gamal, which the Arabs pronounce as J. The law of Moses uses this very word hagag or haghag when it orders the festival ceremonies to be performed. The word signifies to compass a building, an altar or a stone by running round it at a regular and trained pace with the purpose of performing a religious festival of rejoicing and chanting. In the East, the Christians still practice what they call hygge, either during their festival days or at weddings. Consequently, this word has nothing to do with pilgrimage, which is derived from the Italian pellegrino, and this also from the Latin peregrinus, meaning a foreigner. Abraham, during his sojourns, frequently used to build an altar for worship and sacrifice at different places and on particular occasions. When Jacob was on his way to Padan Aram and saw the vision of that wonderful ladder, he erected a stone there, upon which he poured oil and called it Bethel, that is, the house of God. And 20 years later he again visited that stone, upon which he poured oil and pure wine, as recorded in Genesis. A special stone was erected as a monument by Jacob and his father-in-law upon a heap of stones called Galed in Hebrew, and Yagar Sadutha by Laban in his Aramaic language, which means a heap of witness. But the proper noun they gave to the erected stone was Mispa, which in its exact Arabic form is Mispha. Now this Mispha became later on the most important place of worship and a center of the national assemblies in the history of the people of Israel. It was here that Naphtha, a Jewish hero, made a vow before the Lord, and after beating the Ammonites, he is supposed to have offered his only daughter as a burnt offering. It was at Misphah that 400,000 swordsmen from the 11 tribes of Israel assembled and swore before the Lord to exterminate the tribe of Benjamin for an abominable crime committed by the Benjamites of Geba, and succeeded. At Misphah, all the people were summoned by the prophet Samuel, where they swore before the Lord to destroy all their idols and images, and then were saved from the hands of the Philistines. It was here that the nation assembled and Saul was appointed king over Israel. In short, every national question of great moment was decided at this Misphah or at Bethel. It seems that these shrines were built upon high places or upon a raised platform, often called Ramoth, which signifies a high place. Even after the building of the gorgeous Temple of Solomon, the Misphas were held in great reverence. But like the Kaaba at Mecca, these Misphas were often filled with idols and images. After the destruction of Jerusalem and the temple by the Chaldeans, the Misphah still maintained its sacred character as late as the time of the Maccabees during the reign of King Antiochus. Now, what does the word Mispa mean? It is generally translated into a watchtower. It belongs to that class of Semitic nouns, as mazaf, which take or drive their name from the thing that they enclose or contain. Mispa is the place or building which derives its name from safa, an archaic word for stone. The usual word for stone in Hebrew is iben, and in Arabic, hajar. The Syriac for stone is kippah, but safa or safa seems to be common to them all for some particular object or person when designated as a stone. Hence, the real meaning of Mispa is the locality or place in which a safa or stone is set and fixed. It will be seen that when this name, Mispa, was first given to the stone erected upon a heap of stone blocks, there was no edifice built around it. It is the spot upon which a safa rests that is called Mispa. Before explaining the signification of the noun safa, I have to tax again the patience of those of my readers who are not acquainted with the Hebrew. The Arabic language lacks the P sound in its alphabet just as much as do the Hebrew and other Semitic languages, in which the letter P, like G, is sometimes soft and is pronounced like F or PH. In English, as a rule, the Semitic and Greek words containing F sound are transliterated and written by the insertion of PH instead of F, for example, seraph, Mustapha, and philosophy. It is in accordance with this rule that I prefer to write this word Safa to Safa. When Jesus Christ surnamed his first disciple Shimon, Simon, with the significant title of Petros, Peter, he must evidently have had in his mind this ancient sacred Safa, which had been lost long ago. But alas, we cannot positively set out the exact word which he expressed in his own language. The Greek form Petros in the masculine gender, Petra in the feminine, is so unclassical and un-Greek that one is astonished at its being ever adopted by the churches. Did Jesus or any other Jew ever dream of calling the fisherman Bar-Yonah Petros? Decidedly not. The Syriac version called Shitta has frequently rendered this Greek form into Kippa, and the very fact that even the Greek text has preserved the original name Kephas, which the English versions have reproduced in the shape of Cephas, shows that Christ spoke the Aramaic language and gave the surname Kepha to his principal disciple. The old Arabic versions of the New Testament have frequently written St. Peter's name as Shamun, as Safa, that is to say, Simon the Stone. The words of Christ, "Thou art Peter," etc., have their equivalent in the Arabic version in the form of Anta Safa. It follows, therefore, that if Simon is the Safa, the church which was to be built on it would naturally be the Mispha. That Christ should liken Simon to Safa and the church to Mispha is very remarkable. But when I come to divulge the mystery hidden in this similitude and the wisdom embodied in the Safa, then it must be accepted as the most marvelous truth of Prophet Muhammad's merit to his glorious title, the Mustapha. From what has been stated above, our curiosity would naturally lead one to ask the following questions. A. Why did the Muslims and Unitarian descendants of Abraham choose a stone to perform their religious service on or around it? B. Why should this particular stone be named Safa? C. What is the writer driving at? And so on, perhaps several others. The stone was selected as the best suitable material upon which a traveling devotee offered his sacrifice, poured his pure oil and wine, and performed his religious services around it. It was more than this. This stone was erected to commemorate the vows and certain promises which a prophet or righteous man made to his Creator and the revelation he received from God. Consequently, it was a sacred monument to perpetuate the memory and the sacred character of a great religious event. For such a purpose, no other material could surpass the stone. Not only does the solidity and durability of the stone make it suitable for that purpose, but its mere simplicity, cheapness, worthlessness in a lonely place would guarantee it against any attraction of human avarice or enmity to steal or destroy it. As is well known, the law of Moses strictly forbids to hew or carve the stones of the altar. The stone called Sefer was to be absolutely left natural. No images, inscriptions, or engravings were to be wrought upon it, lest any one of these should be worshipped in time to come by the ignorant people. Gold, iron, silver, or any other metal could not answer all these qualities required in the simple stone. It will be understood, therefore, that the purest, the most durable, eligible, and the safest material for a religious and sacred monument could be none other than the stone. The molten bronze statue of the Jupiter worshipped by the heathen Roman Pontifex Maximus was taken away from the Pantheon and recast into the image of St. Peter by order of a Christian sovereign pontiff. And indeed, the wisdom embodied in the Safa is admirable and worthy of all those who worship no other object besides God. It should also be remembered that not only is the erected Safa a sacred monument, but the very spot and the circuit in which it is situated as well. And it is for this reason that the Muslim Hajj, like the Hebrew Hijjah, is performed round the building where the sacred stone is fixed. It is known fact that the Karamatians, who carried the black stone from the Kaaba and kept it in their own country for some 20 years, were obliged to bring and put it back in its former place, because they could not draw the pilgrims from Mecca. If it had been gold or other precious object, it could not have existed at least for some 5,000 years, or even if it had had on it some carvings or images of art, it would have been destroyed by the Prophet Muhammad himself. As to the meaning, or rather meanings, of the Safa, I have already referred to them as qualities of the stone. The word consists of the consonants sadi and pi, ending with the vowel hai, both as a verb and noun. It means, in its qal form, to purify, to watch, to gaze from distance, and to choose. It also has the meanings of to be firm and sound. In its Peel paradigm, which is causative, it simply means to make a choice, to cause to elect, and so on. A man who watched from a tower was called Sophie. In ancient times, that is, before the building of the Temple of Solomon, the prophet or the man of God was called Roy or Hosi, which means the seer. The Hebrew scholars are, of course, familiar with the word Musafpi, or rather Musapi, which is equivalent in orthography to the Arabic Musaffi, which signifies one who endeavors to elect that which is pure, sound, firm, and so forth. The true Sophia, or wisdom, the true knowledge of God, the true science of religion and morality, and the infallible selection of the last messenger of Allah from among all his messengers, belonged to the ancient institution of Israel called Misphas, until it was transformed into the Misphah of the Nasara or Christian. It is indeed marvelous to see how complete is the analogy, and how the economy of God concerning his dealings with man is carried on with absolute uniformity and order. The Misphah is the filter where all the data and persons are filtered and strained by the Musaffi, Hebrew Musapi, as by a colander, for such is the meaning of the word, so that the genuine is distinguished and separated from the false, and the pure from the impure. Yet centuries succeed each other, myriads of prophets come and go, still the Mustapha, the elected one, does not appear. Then comes the holy Jesus, but he is rejected and persecuted, because there existed no longer in Israel that official Misphah which would have recognized and announced him as a true messenger of God who was sent to bear witness to the Mustapha, that was the last prophet to follow him. The grand assembly of the synagogue, convoked and instituted by Ezra and Nehemiah, the last member of which was Simeon the Just, was succeeded by the supreme tribunal of Jerusalem, called the Sanhedrin. But this latter assembly, whose president was the Nasi, or the prince, condemned Jesus to death because it did not recognize his person and the nature of his divine mission. A few sophists, however, knew Jesus and believed in his prophetical mission. But the crowds at one time mistook him for the Mustapha, or the elected messenger of Allah, and seized and acclaimed him king, but he vanished and disappeared from among them. He was not the Mustapha, otherwise it would be ridiculous to make Simon the Safa and his church the Misphah, for the office and the duty of the Misphah was to watch and look for the last messenger, so that when he came he would be proclaimed as the elected and chosen one, the Mustapha. If Jesus were the Mustapha, there would be no need for the institution of the Misphah any longer. This is a very deep and interesting subject. It deserves patient study. Prophet Muhammad Al-Mustapha is the mystery of the Misphah and the treasure of the Sophia.